So well, good morning, everybody. We're here at wonderful KUHSdenver.com, and we're turning down the volume so that you can hear the melodic tones of your host, me, of course, Lowell Whiteman of 360 Performance every Friday at 11 a.m. And today I have a friend and a colleague with me, Brian Byro. We'll get to some details about Brian more specifically in a moment, but first I want to just share with you some things about what's going on in the universe of activities and athletics for this weekend. And we have to expand it to the universe because there's not a lot going on just in your community. We're all, quarantined and sequestered, and it's tough to find an activity that is going to engage you and be able to be not monitored by public health departments. Well, one of the things that's interesting, my friend Pete Blackburn with CBS Sports, he's writing his little newsletter actively this week, and he's talking about golf and actually seeing golf. And that's with two people 6 feet apart playing two other people more than 6 feet apart. And that's Peyton Manning, and Tiger Woods is going to go against Tom Brady and Phil Mickelson. And the prognosticators have the Tiger Woods Peyton Manning pair on top. And they've ranked them with several categories: handicap, who's got the arm, the swing, the championships, and who's the trash talker. I'll start at the bottom. Well, they've got the trash talking going to Phil Mickelson and Manning as the top leaders in that category. Now, if that's the deciding factor who's going to win, I don't think it will be. But if it was, that's where it would go. But I think it's going to be in, you position play, and that's all Manning is all about. He position plays. He's not going to overwhelm you, but he's going to surprise you. And then when he's got Tiger Woods there to pick up the slack, you got to go with the team. They got a negative 195 from the handicappers. They're on top. Now, the other lead into my guest today with Brian is about talking about how to prepare and plan. Well, the Major League Baseball has been planning and preparing a season, and they think they've got it. 82 games as a lead up to the World Series. Let's see how that plays out. What's your plan for leading whatever you're leading? Well, the Major League Baseball, that's their plan. 82 games to the World Series. I'm interested in the NHL, actually, because I think they could have a Stanley Cup, but then they'd have to stop that and go right into the next season in November. We'll wait and see how that plays out. The other thing is, when you look at energy and development of a plan with that energy, you think about youth. Well, the NFL, according to Pete, has ranked the under 25-year-olds and who they are and what they bring to the game. Well, the top one is Patrick Mahomes. In fact, the top three are quarterbacks of 25 and under. So that's Lamar Jackson with the Ravens and Deshaun Watson from the Texans lead out that top 10, with others like Darius Leonard from the Colts, and then because you got to give props to the defense, and then we've got one of my favorites, who's a Colorado boy, Christian McCaffrey with the Panthers as a running back. So you've got to say, well, if we're going to look at youth, let's look at the top tier and peers of youth, 25 and under, and the NFL gives us a good list of 10. Now, if you're asking yourself, okay, got a holiday, got a weekend, what am I going to watch on TV? Well, lately there hasn't been much. But NASCAR's coming back. You got golf, as I just mentioned. And we're also going to have horse racing. Belmont is going to run a race and have some fun to take a look at over this weekend. So tune that in. If it was back in the day when I was a kid, you only had 3 channels. So it might be a little bit of a journey to find where they're at, because we've got so many choices and so many wonderful movies that we've seen. Well, unless you're like me and you've seen them all already and there's nothing left to watch. But that be as it may, I want to end my introduction to my great guest, Brian Byro, with a quote from Eli Manning. Eli was at a commencement, not because he was graduating, because he was talking to the graduates. He gave a commencement speech to a graduating class of 2020, and he said this: embracing awkward is worth cultivating. And I think that's a great punchline for my introduction to Brian Byro, a friend and colleague, and author of many topics about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and that's leadership. His recent work is Kindness ROI. He's got other books I'm going to ask him to talk about with us today, but I'm going to ask him to talk about it under the quote that we give every week on Mindset Moments. And here is that quote. Carry out a random act of kindness with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you. So said Princess Diana. I think that's very apropos to introduce you to Brian Biro, out there on the East Coast, taking some sun and some fun, having a great time. And we're here to talk about the great parts of being a leader. But I'm going to start off with this question, Brian. When you wake up in the morning, or when anybody wakes up in the morning, where do you recommend that today's leaders should place their first thought in getting ready to start their mindset for the day?
Well, that's a great question, and it's so fun to be with you, Lowell. We're kindred spirits, so we probably could go for about 6 hours. So did you tell them we're going to be on a little longer today?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great place to start, because really one of the most powerful principles I learned from my mentor, who was the great coach John Wooden, was to begin every day and end every day on a positive note, because that's what's going to carry you forward. So when I think about starting my day, it really comes down to a few key things. Number one is gratitude. The first question I ask myself every day is, what am I deeply grateful about? Gratitude is the highest frequency emotion. And when you're filled with gratitude, there's just not room, all right, for look at things in a negative way. I also love the fact that you bring in the concept of movement. Our energy is created by the way that we move. And so in the beginning of my day, in the first hour and a half, I've gone for a very long walk. I've done some exercise, got that energy moving, and in that spirit of gratitude. And the last really relates to your beautiful quote from Princess Diana. I start my day with the Prayer for Peace by St. Francis of Assisi, which is all about service. And service is love in action. That's from Mother Teresa. And so you start your day with a focus on service. You start your day with physical movement to elevate your energy. And you start your day by recognizing, getting clear of what you're grateful about in your life right now. Man, that's a start to a day.
You know, you said it when you admitted that we're both kindred spirits. I have to admit, though, that I am younger of the two of us, and I'm taller. Just want to put that out there, just so everybody understands. Because it's hard to tell right here, right now, in this dimension. Okay, so I've got that.
I admit that I'm sitting on a pillow right now. I have to admit I'm sitting on a pillow so I can get up to the middle of the screen. So, okay, you got your point.
But I guess it doesn't matter when you're in the pool who goes faster, whether they're taller or shorter. So I want to make sure people know that Brian, as a kindred spirit to me, has also been a coach at the Olympic level, a junior Olympic coach, and has had the honor and privilege of speaking with one of my idols, Coach John Wooden. May he rest in peace. But he's always present for me in the things that you just said. And when I deal with athletes, I take what you've said and I ask them to look at and remove the negatives when you start your day. Find those in your mind, and everybody's got them historically, so that you are aware of the plan on how to address them, so that they don't become obstacles, that you're there with that. So whether it's the driver of love, service, kindness, gratitude, all of those things are important. I'm wondering, is it the environment that they're in that they need to continue to monitor throughout the day? Now, for me, there's a biological movement right away in the morning. I have to deal with that right away. But I want to expand my thoughts into where else do I take it, and should I be concerned if I raise my positives really high of overachieving and being a little bit too full of myself?
Well, you set me up really well on that, because one of my books is There Are No Overachievers. So we cannot really overachieve. That really is also a John Woodenism. When I first met him, he asked, I said, what's the difference between a good team and a great team? And one of the first things he said was, Brian, there are no overachievers. We are all underachievers. We have no idea of what we're really capable of. So I think there's a balance there. I don't think that setting yourself up to make the day the best possible it can be, to make it your masterpiece, is going to make you have a huge ego. As long as you embrace the power of humility. And to me, humility doesn't mean you can't have confidence. John Wooden was extremely confident, but he was incredibly humble. He used to say it's what you learn after you know everything that makes the difference. Because being humble doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself less. But only those who are humble, and I know you know this from working with the top athletes, only those who are humble are lifelong learners. Only those who are humble are always looking for a way to get better. And when you raise that focus of humility with that focus on gratitude, kindness, creating the environment you want to be around, controlling your controllables, you move from ego to a real positive competitor, because what you're trying to do is improve yourself. The first and foremost competition is to be the best of which you're capable and move closer to potential.
Brian, moving to be your best is something I want to ask you about, especially in the context of humility, because vocabulary tends to be a place of stumbling for those I've worked with that are already humble, but then all of a sudden words get in the way, and they struggle for the right vocabulary, the glossary of terms that reflect where they're at. So in your experience, I know you've got the list of keywords and phrases that really speak to people quickly, but how important is it for, in that planning, to really think through the words I choose, the timing of the word placement, to create the energy and the humility within that energy?
It's vital. Your self-talk is really going to set your direction. Your self-talk is your life GPS. So I've known some people who so often say the words, "I'm tired." And what you focus on is what you create. You keep telling yourself you're tired. Guess what? All of a sudden you start showing up tired. So many people say, "I have to." One of the most important breakthroughs in life is the shift from "I have to" "I want to, choose to, like to, love to, can't wait to." That change moves you towards where you want to get to. Really, when you think about it, Lowell, the only thing you have to do is die. Everything else is a matter of choice. Now, there's consequences. But when you say, "I choose to," I want to, that means you're moving it, because the words that are attached to "I have to," that disappear over time, but we learn them when we're little kids, are the two words "or else." I have to do this, or else something bad's going to happen. Now, you don't have to say the "or else," but that's in there. It's been ingrained. It's been conditioned. Shifting it to "I want to, I choose to, I can't wait to, I love to," is to choose the direction of your life to be what you want it to be. So absolutely, your self-talk and what you need to pay attention. And sometimes the most important way to evaluate your self-talk is to listen. Listen to other people and really take it in before you formulate what you're going to respond with. We sometimes say what we don't want to say because we haven't fully listened. We've been formulating our response before it's time. So I love that you bring that up, because every top athlete that I work with, every top leader I work with, this is something that really pay attention to in coaching, is focusing on moving towards the choice of "I want to, choose to, love to, like to."
I'm glad you made that connection, Brian, because the humility with a vocabulary that enriches your actions moves to the expectations you set. It's that continuity of the thinking from that vocabulary that sets the stage of a delivery of behavior amongst people that is connected. That's where I then begin to define the championship potential. Is that, okay, I'm humble, I've got good words, I've clearly communicated what I expect of you, and through that expectation, I can take action on it because I understand you clearly, so that there's no error or the production of error possibility that I'm going to deliver what you want. So then we bring in the word of integrity. And I want you to expand on that in a minute, but first I want you to tell the audience, how do they get in touch with you? Where's the best place for them to uniquely and directly get in touch with you?
Well, pretty simple these days. It's just my websites. I have two websites because, as Eli Manning said about embracing the awkward, well, as a professional speaker, I was having a record year I've done live events for 30 years. My passion is to get in front of people and bring out the best in them. And then one day they were gone. So I had to really adjust to the awkward, which is moving towards virtual. So it's brianbyro.com is one of my websites, and the other brand new one, the awkward one, though not as awkward as it used to be, we're getting there fast, is brianbyrovirtual.com. And all kinds of information. It's where my books are, but I love connecting with people. My life is about helping people understand that they have choices. So appreciate it so much.
Well, I want to make sure that people know about that. We'll say it again a few more times in the show, because at some point, Brian and I are going to have a conversation about how I can bring Brian to you through his training as someone who desires to want to produce his events so he gets out to more people. So whether it's a private invitation or something that we globally communicate through social media, I'm going to make sure that Brian Biro is more an active part of my life, because I've committed to him recently that it's been far too much of a gap between one visit and the next. And I committed to him a few months ago that I was going to make sure that didn't happen as long as it did in the past. So thank you for that, Brian. We'll be telling.
It makes me feel sure that what happened to say you're taller than me now, Lowell. It's easier for me to say you're taller and better looking.
See, there's an expectation right there. I love that.
What you're talking about, that expectation, Lowell, is that, and I know you know it from your coaching, it's called the Pygmalion Effect. The Pygmalion Effect says that our thoughts, our beliefs, and our expectations are magnetic, that we are pulling people in the direction of how we view them. And that is crucial to understand, that that's how we affect each other. But even more important to understand, you are Pygmalion to yourself. Your expectations of yourself will draw you as a magnet towards the level of those expectations, whether they're great, medium, or poor. So it's important to really live that effect, that Pygmalion effect, which came from mythology, is so powerful. A fun, quick little story. There was a substitute teacher who was going to come into a school because the regular teacher had gotten in an automobile accident. It was a third grade class, and in the staff room, all the other teachers said, "Oh, you poor guy, you're going to have 2 months with this class. They are the worst kids ever. They are wild. They are undisciplined. They are just, they're horrible." So he just kind of took it in. He walks in the classroom, and the first thing he says was, "I just talked to the other teachers, and they told me that you are the best, most creative, incredible class that's ever been at this school." Well, 3 months later, when the teacher came back, she couldn't recognize those kids, because that different Pygmalion view, that different expectation, the kids rose to that level of being creative, incredible, fantastic. They were, as we think of people, we move them in that direction.
The story is such a great setup, and we didn't talk much beforehand about the details, but it goes to that expectation for the teacher to the students sets an image for those students, a visual picture of what they expect of themselves based on the exchange of the teacher to them. And that's the next segment for us, is looking at our five senses as those organic cellular components of what really ignite and drive all those other great skills we create. So taking that Pygmalion process and putting in an expectation that creates a vision, an idea in the minds and sights of the kids, then allows them to move, speak, hear, and talk about and relate to those expectations. So when you are talking to audiences, Brian, what do you say to them when they have a vision in their head about their presence, but now they're thinking about, how do I go beyond that? Oh gosh, I don't know if I can. My vision was this. My expectation was this. What do you do or say to get them to alter that outcome and visualize something different?
Yeah, there's a couple of real important keys there. First is, that I'm known for having people break 1-inch thick boards karate style. And these are not people who are trained in karate. They learn it in that moment. And the metaphor just perfectly describes what you just talked about. I've had 750,000 people over the last 30 years break these boards. Probably 5% of them don't break it the first time. Yes. All right. Black belt right there. 5%, maybe 8% don't break it the first time. Has nothing to do with their strength or coordination. Has everything to do with their focus. Because what they focus on is what they create. And when they focus on the obstacle, right, and it's different than seeing the obstacle. I got to know it's there. This is what I got to deal with. But then the key to breaking through, not just a board, but in life, is to shift your focus to the other side. Shift your focus beyond the obstacle. So the two powerful principles of vision. Number one, Do not use your memory to see. In almost all of my seminars, everybody watching, here's the question. And I've done this with about 750,000 people, and virtually everyone has said yellow. Well, they're red and white. All right? They've been red and white for more than 40 years. All right? So what we've got to do is recognize that when we use our memory to see, we do not see what is, we see what was. And the other key about what you talked about with the senses is in our visualizations, our affirmations. The more you can see, smell, taste, feel, put yourself into that exact reality. Visualization, the more powerful the affirmation, the more powerful the movement towards that vision.
Brian, when you take a look at the audiences, and when you look in their eyes at a certain point, you can see the wheels turning. You can in fact, in some senses, get a feeling for where they're at in the room. And now they've gotten to the point of looking beyond what is, excuse me, what is, and they're looking to go beyond what that point is. What do you say to people when they incur an obstacle after they've succeeded going beyond one time, and now, oh my gosh, I've raised the bar? What do you say to them then?
It's the same process, and what we can't do is that's where we fall in the trap of using our memory to see. We think we've arrived instead of we've arrived at the next step. It's all a journey. It's all, I love the fact that Coach Wooden, and we'll talk more about him, really focused on what you put in rather than what comes out. So once you've reached that new level, once you've broken through one obstacle, that makes it much more powerful to redo that same process and start to look to the next height and keep moving it forward. That's how we get to the next place. And it's uncanny. I had this happen probably 100 times with my swimmers when I was a U.S. swimming coach. We would set a specific goal for a time to make the junior nationals, to make the senior nationals. I probably had 100 kids hit that time to the 100th of a second. All right? To the 100th of a second. And it always made me think, what if we had set it a half a second faster? They would probably hit that one. What we focus on is what we create. And so you want to keep refocusing and move to that next level. It's an ongoing, and it's the fun of the journey that creates the result.
There are people that accuse me of multitasking too often, too fast, and question the results that may come out of that process. I then will argue, of course, but I then back up, take a look, and say, well, maybe they have a point. I'm speaking too fast, even though in my mind, I know the idea is fully formed. It's just, it ain't coming out of my mouth the way I thought it should. So what do you say to people about connecting all of the, I visualize it, I actually can hear myself, practice through that. My self-talk is out there, but then the words that come out of my mouth don't match up. What do I do with that? What are my strategies for that? I can't put them back in my mouth and reprocess.
That's true, but the past is history. So once they're out, let them go. If they're not what you want to be, right, it's time to recreate them. And I really think one of the most powerful ways to deal with that self-talk and with communication and saying more what you want to say is to remember the KISS principle. Keep it simple, superstar. What happens is we try too hard to make it perfect. Keep it simple. The simpler it is, the more clear it's going to be, the more actionable it will be. When it comes to your affirmations, and that you then use to visualize, just that I am, bring in a little bit of that emotion that you feel right there, but keep it simple. That's the most important thing of all. And understand something about communication. The Banner study on communication looked at the 3 elements in communication. This is to others and to self. And the 3 elements in communication are body language, tonality, which is not what you say, but how you say it, and words. 93% of what makes communication work is not words. It's the body language is 55%, tonality is 38%. So if you've got your emotion if you're saying it with that passion. That's why it's less important the words are perfect, as if the emotion and the body language that's behind it is really driving it forward. You do that, and you're going to be moving in the direction towards those visualizations and affirmations.
And that makes sense with the other study on the other side of that is about the power of listening and how much we take in. So if the quality of what's said is there, then the listener has a really well-formed picture when they hear the words. Now, that being said, Nike has a phrase that states, just do it, which doesn't necessarily address the connection of the five senses. There are times when I want to make sure that I connect my smell with a vision or something I hear or something I feel. I think one of the examples I shared with you is about, that special person in your life. There was a moment where you smelled the rose that you gave them. You saw the vision of their presence and you heard the music in the air. And now every time you hear, smell, or see those things, you go right back to that point in time and you feel good about it. So it's as well-being scientists in psychology say, put the good things in front of you to remember the good things, so that you have that gladness. What are some of the strategies that you share with people to make those connections precise and recall in the way that you want them to be?
In Beyond Success, the book that John Wooden wrote the foreword to, I have an exercise in the last chapter that's called the Personal Victory Exercise. And it is exactly what you just talked about. It's very simple. When you talk about that moment with that special person and you remember what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it felt like, all your senses were alive in that moment. That is called an anchor. Right? It's an anchor that, the same way that Pavlov could ring a bell eventually, that would automatically create a salivary response in an animal. We're the same way. We are human animals. And so when we have an experience, we create those anchors. The personal victory exercise is a way to consciously, positively use anchors to raise your level to your best. So what you do, what I explain in a real short way, is you go through and remember the best moments of your life. If you're in sport, you remember the triumphs, the best workout you had, the best come from behind. And you put yourself, first you just list them. Then you go back and you add your senses. You remember what it felt like. You remember the sounds. You remember the way that the chlorine smelled in that indoor pool that day. You remember what everything looked like, the people around you. And then you create an anchor. My anchor is with my right hand, I grab my left wrist, I squeeze it, and I go make a fist and say yes. I attach that to all those personal victories. And now all I have to do is squeeze my wrist, and I've got hundreds of personal victories that are attached to it. So that's the way we use, and the more you use your senses to build the power of those anchors, the more powerful the anchors are. And therefore, they will help you immediately be able to get past the fear and move into your power.
I'm glad you said that, because that use of imagery is important nowadays more than ever, with people being sequestered at home, limiting the exposure they have to different things that they were routinely seeing. And I've said to many of my athletes, I said, have an exercise. Get out your crayons and start making little signs and words and put them around your house. Find pictures and put them in your phone and go through and browse your phone app on pictures, so that you begin to maintain that kind of a survivalist kind of mentality, but it's also one that generates the kindness. It generates the gratitude in you to say, my wife and I have agreed that every day we don't just say good morning, we say good morning with eye contact, so that we are seen and being seen, and making sure that the day starts that way. So far with setting a mindset, looking at the skills, the five senses that make those connections, we're gonna talk more in the next segment about environments and the power of the environments even more today, because of what we're experiencing, that we need to really, when we take those walks, see more than just the sky is blue. See the bark is rough and ragged, or it's bare and soft, or the pine needles are long and green as well as brown and shriveled. See the details. So as we get prepared for that, Brian, share with people where they can find your next connection. Are you going to do a web study or a web training course in the near future?
You know, I've been doing some more of the programs I used to do live. This week I did a program for Microsoft, so I haven't nailed down what I'm going to do with my next public event, but it probably will be in July, and it'll probably be an ROI of Kindness live webinar to give people a chance to really never have we needed kindness more than we do now. So that's indefinite, but on brianbyrovirtual.com, I'm sure it'll be posted as soon as we nail down the date.
And the ROI of Kindness is an Amazon listing. Actually, all the books are on Amazon, aren't they?
Well, ROI of Kindness is the only one that is not, because I co-authored this with a fellow by the name of Mac Anderson, who you probably know because he created a company called Successories.
Yep.
And so the way you get a hold of the ROI of Kindness is you go to inspirekindness.com. That's the exclusive place where it's sold right now. Probably in 6 months or so, we'll start to expand that. But right now, because it also helps a nonprofit that we call Kindness for Kids to stop bullying.
Or you could attend and pay for attendance to an ROI Kindness training seminar, and the book could be part of that.
There you go. There's my promoter going to work right away. I love it.
Okay, as I talk to Brian, I'm going to look to everybody to make sure that you know that environments are changing, and hopefully they're changing to a place where we're going to be participating with one another face to face. But with that being said, I want to make sure that you're safe, and as we've talked about every week on our show, go to avcare.com and take a look at the Waltz Free and Waltz D products. That's the Waltz Free germicidal hand lotion and the Waltz D disinfectant. All of them have a green footprint. So they're not alcohol based. They're not ammonia based. They're not caustic. They don't have to get a special suited person to dispose of them. And the lotion is awesome. So go to avcare.com and use this code. This code will give you a discount, 360 PERF, 360 performance or PERF, 360 PERF, and you'll get a discount from AvCare from me to you for those products. Because I want to make sure you're safe and that you're leaving a green footprint. You don't need to dry out your hands or have to worry about a caustic hazard controls crew coming in to dispose of your disinfectants. So I want to say again, thank you so much to Brian Byro for being here today with me. As we continue with our conversation, we're going to talk about environments. That's our mental conditioning segment. Where my belief, Brian, is environments are underappreciated and overutilized from the standpoint that we just go in and go out. We don't think about what's on the desk, what's on the countertop, what's the color of the wall, and what influence it has on me wanting to sit there and participate. I know as a coach with my sporting teams and individual athletes, I make sure that they construct their locker, a place that they're at a lot of their life, in a way that represents something that's going to motivate, stimulate, and generate the kinds of attitude that they want to bring to the playing surface and compete. Now, how does that play with the executive community as a breakthrough leader, making sure the environment is conducive for that kind of potential outcome?
You know, it's a great focus, and one that we can often overlook. And I think that the beautiful thing that you're talking about is surround yourself and create for yourself an environment that fills you with passion. To me, the greatest thing about human beings is we'll do more for others than we'll do for ourselves. So my office space is filled with the people that are my purpose, with my family. Coach Wooden's over here. I had a picture when I did a book signing with him. He's right behind me back there. It is so important, as you say, to create that environment, to control that controllable, because everything we've talked about, Lowell, is about controlling our controllables and letting go of that which we don't control. That's where we create angst. That's where we shift our focus to the obstacle instead of the breakthrough. So, number one, I would encourage you that you, in your environment, as you say, in your locker, in their space, create an environment that as you walk in, it makes you feel like you rose up 3 points on a 10-point energy scale. You see the people that you would do anything for. You see the kind of the kind of colors, the kind of energy, energy and frequency that elevates your own. And that is about choice and about something you talked about before, which is, I call it alertness. We as human beings have a very untapped level of alertness to pay attention. I think our most underused sense is one we talk about. It's called listening. Most of the time we are thinking about what we're going to say rather than really listening to what they say. One of my heroes is Gandhi. Gandhi, 1 day a week, did not speak. And on that day, not once was he thinking about what he was going to say. And part of his magic, his impact on others, was they sensed this sense of connection that came because they knew he truly listened. So we can, one of the greatest things I ever did when I was going to college at Stanford was take a class called Observation of Children. And it was 11 weeks, and 1 day a week for 3 hours, I watched one child in a preschool. Never communicated with her, just watched her. And after the first day, I realized I had never watched anybody for more than 5 minutes. And by the end of that first day, I realized I knew more about her than had I talked to her all the time, because I had never used my sense of observation. And so we have that power to develop our senses, which allows us to then create around us the environment that creates that passion that allows us to move towards our potential.
You know, and that all is summarized for me in choices. We have choices every day that we make. And what I hear you telling me is that for me to make choices that are going to help with me in my return on investment to kindness or my breakthrough leadership methodologies, they've got to be purposeful in my intent. I've got to do it every morning with a mindset that looks for that intent and makes the connection purposeful. So that if I'm going to truly hear the words of begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey states, and back away from that, as you said Gandhi did, and being quiet, because there was a purposeful intent. He had an end in mind. And it was initially, to him, it's self-serving. As I tell my athletes, I say, have this mantra of, it's all about me. Not in a selfish way, but in a self-aware way. Because if you don't take care of you, and being good for you in a purposeful way, it is difficult, if not impossible, for you to be anything good for anybody else. It's got to be a focus with that intent. So my question for you then, Brian, in this area of environment is, as the tasks or projects rise in their purposefulness and their urgency, how do we maintain our investment in kindness when there's all these forces pulling at us?
Well, as I said, to me, we are at a crucial moment in our lives where we need to focus on kindness more than ever. I've never seen more unkindness in the world, and yet we have the opportunity to move towards it. The key to kindness is to be kind when others are not kind. It's easy to be kind to kind people. But what about when people are unfair? What about when people are scared and therefore they kind of work out towards you? That's where kindness really matters. I worked in a program for Kaiser Permanente in California, a giant HMO, and in their mother-child healthcare area, what we found was that warmth was missing when people weren't warm back. We focused on that shift to ask yourself this question. Here's a great question when you're about to get defensive or angry. What else could this mean? What else could this mean? Instantly, you shift towards a more kind focus. John Wooden always said, we can disagree without being disagreeable. We don't have to throw names at people. We don't have to put people down. And only when we move towards that level of kindness, to be able to disagree without being disagreeable, can we learn from each other. Because until that happens, we're just in a defensive mode. And when we're in defensive mode, nothing changes. We just pull into our area. To heck with the kindness. I got to be right. I'd rather learn than have to be right. And that's when you can start to be kind and disagree without being disagreeable. So the key here is to take a look at yourself and say, when in the situations in the past when I've been unkind, when I get defensive, how can I change that? Ask the question, what else could this mean? Shift it, become easy to impress and really hard to offend, and you will have 10 times the impact on the people around you and yourself.
every coach or parent has had that one child or player that has tested that skill of being kind when, and like Bill Walton was perhaps Coach Wooden's biggest test to that. For me, it's any number of players. It was my son of my two children, and with my grandkids, it's none of them, because that's his problem. But it's so interesting of what it does to cause you to pause when you have that thought. It won't aggravate or escalate the energy to a negative place when you just think about that question you just said. So when we're caught in those environments, is it helpful to engage your compatriots with that question as well, so that we kind of leverage and maximize the energy to that intent by multiplying with the participation of everybody?
I really think so. I think it's always a good thing. One way you can really dissipate anger and striking out and replace it with kindness is to ask more than tell more often. As soon as you tell, you create a pushback, right? And as soon as you ask, you kind of start to create the opportunity to do like Aikido and work together to move and flow. So working with the people around you, drawing them in, can create an environment that moves beyond blame. The ultimate destructor of teams and families and careers is blame, because blame is about the past. And only when you shift from what I call a blame buster do you have a chance to move beyond it. Because think about it, when it's blame about the past, the present, and the future, it's always about the past. And the second you go to the past, you can't change it. So a blame buster doesn't pretend things didn't go wrong or we didn't make mistakes. They say, okay, what happened? What are we going to learn? What are we going to do now? Here's what I think is so powerful about consistent kindness. It has a delayed, powerful effect. John Wooden was probably the kindest person that I've ever met. And in fact, if you talk to the hundreds of thousands of people who knew him and asked them one word to describe him, I would say that a huge majority would say kind. He treated people with dignity and respect. Bill Walton, as you said, was a wonderful guy in a lot of ways, but he was challenging at 21 and a character, still a character. When John Wooden got older, and Bill Walton, as a result of that consistent kindness by Wooden, even when he had to kind of show him the way, he did it in a kind and respectful way. By the time John Wooden got older, Bill Walton called him 7 days a week. He revered the man. That consistent kindness had a delayed impact, and it will have with your children. It will have with the people with your competitors. It will have with everyone, because over time, that kindness wins. It has a much higher vibration than unkindness, and eventually it will win out.
Well, and the continued kindness reminds me of a book that is named after what you said, Flow. Healy Gesture is the author of that book, and in that book, he talks about not directly mentioning kindness, but he mentions the energy of flow, the positivity of flow, and how that as it's present, it gets infectious and it connects with anybody you want to share that connection with. Or as you said, being kind has this kind of perpetual impact. It just keeps repeating itself and flows its way back to you. But I think there needs to be that purposeful intent of pushing the flow, setting the expectation, and clearly stating, here is my kindness to you. Now, you don't necessarily have to say it. You can do it, and it can be discovered. But people need to feel the presence of that flow and the energy and kindness within the flow throughout any environment that you're in. Now, as I say that, and I look at my watch, I see that we're in our final segment. But as I promised you before, I want to make sure I'm going to be totally commercial and blatantly apparent about making sure that Brian Biro is well understood and respected for his presence in the marketplace. And I'm going to break through to you about Brian Biro at brianbiro.com. And Brian, what's the other website? Brian Biro Virtual?
BrianBiroVirtual.com.
Okay, and I want you to look forward to the moment when he's going to produce another class and talk about the ROI of kindness. So that's the new book, and that's how you would get it. And also look at Amazon for all of the other books that Brian has written, and included people like Coach John Wooden, who is an idol of mine. I still reflect on his pyramid almost on a weekly basis as a reminder. That's one of the images in my environment to remind me of what I need to know. And as I say that, I want to just make sure I put a shout out to Roberto Ray, who played baseball for me. I'm old. I'm an old guy. I'm an old coach. And he was the first. He was the
older.
Well, I didn't want to be insulting. I didn't want to bring it up again. Just level the play. I'm going to level up. Roberto was an individual player who brought to my attention years ago the Puerto Rican and Mexican baseball leagues in Chicago, which to this day have the best food of any seventh inning break I have ever had. Families set up picnic baskets all around the room with what's going on. And I'm going to apologize to some people if we have a little bit of a break in our system. I don't know what happened, but there he is. We're back. All right. So that's Roberto Ray. Good to have you with me, Roberto. So as we're in our final segment is on performance results, but that's kind of a camouflage because it's really about process and talking about bringing the mindset you start every day with the skills, that natural 5 sense set of skills into any environment. It requires a recipe, an action steps, a step-by-step, check the box. Whoever you are on that scale of anal retentiveness, you need a process. You need a method to put it into play. So when I've ever had a breakthrough, I've always wanted to go beyond my prescription and my expectations. And until you, Brian, I didn't have any exclamation about when to realize and recognize I had that breakthrough. And what is that one word reference that you have, Brian, to recognize I'm in it? I've broken through.
Woo!
It's the woo. I love that. So share with everybody how everybody's deserving of a woo, but where does it manifest itself in connecting all the dots?
Excellent. Well, the woo, first of all, it means the window of opportunity. The window of opportunity is every precious moment. You never know if the next person you'll meet, even on a virtual, Zoom event, if that person may become a lifelong friend. You never know if the next time you talk to that granddaughter who's just turning 8 today, if something you say may shift the whole direction of the rest of her life because you saw something, you seized the woo, and you said it. So life is about seizing the woo, carpal woo. And I really believe that the keys, we've talked about the keys. Number one is purpose. When you have purpose, all right, you set the direction you'll see opportunities because they're in relation to moving towards that purpose. Purpose is the ultimate source of energy. The other key, though, that many people get lost on is to not view that the journey is the woo, that the journey is the window of opportunity. That John Wooden, 27 years at UCLA, never said the words winning or losing to his players. He never said the words. Now, did he want to win? Oh, yeah. But what he wanted was for them to embrace the definition of success that put it into their choice and their control, their effort, their energy, their attitude. He said success is peace of mind that comes from knowing you've given the best of which you're capable. In other words, focus on what you put in, your effort, your energy, your attitude. That is the journey. The biggest shift in my life, Will, came from one word switch in my self-talk. I shifted from I grew up like a lot of kids wanting my dad to be proud of me, and my dad was from a generation where he just could never express that. And so I started to work hard in school and sports, but I never felt good enough. I was always trying to be the best. One day, I shifted my focus to focusing on being my best instead of the best. And everything moved up from that moment forward because I was no longer focusing on comparing myself to everybody else. I was focusing on self-evaluating, on getting better. It made me more humble because I no longer had to be right. I just wanted to get better. And I can feel good about where I am today and still want to get better tomorrow. It created that process of journey it also made me a heck of a lot more fun to be around because I wasn't feeling bad when you did great. I want you to do great. And great competitors want their competitors to be awesome. They don't want them to be off because you draw energy from that competitor. It's really one of your best teammates. You want somebody who's going to make you bring the best you've got to give. All right, and that sense of coming from a place of what I put in is what I control. And if I am present in that, am I focused on that, I'm purposeful about that, I have the greatest chance to rise to my true potential.
You know, you remind me of an Olympic athlete that was struggling with the competitors giving him verbally hard time about his attitude, his demeanor, his posture. But that was just him. He had that revelation of process. And I'm referring to Michael Johnson, 5-time gold medalist in track and field. And when he was asked...
Golden shoes.
Yeah, and he was the first to kind of bring that out and be kind of flashy and that kind of thing. But that was part of his labeling, an emblem for himself, an imagery that reminded him of his process. He had a thing where he would push his fingers together, his thumb and his index finger together, so that he maintained a certain flow of his hands in his process. And he never, ever focused on the finish line or crossing the tape first. He focused on the steps and processes it took purposefully to get the right time. That time then would be the thing that got him across the line. And it wasn't until after he won the 5 gold medals that his competitors that were giving him these razzings about his gold shoes and being too flamboyant and this and that and the other thing, that realized in his retorts that it's process. It was my purposeful intent of the process, my fingers, my feet. He actually would feel the turf underneath him and the sounds it would make because he knew that sound was what was going to be fast. And that changed the whole dynamic of the Olympic training process for athletes after him. And that to me is an example of what you just said.
It absolutely is. And it's a great way to go because every day, as an athlete, you know this, working with athletes, some days you are physically feeling better than others. Some days you're feeling light. In the sport of swimming, 99% of the time that you're training, you are torn down. You are working so hard. You're at 5 o'clock in the morning workouts, double workouts, your body's torn down. And you need to understand that and to embrace that process. As a marathon runner, one of the things I ran some off-road marathons, loved them. But one of the foundational process pieces was I always loved to run uphill first. And that's just a focus on purpose. And that's what training and the journey is. You put so much heart, so much focus on the journey and the preparation, the things you control, that when you get to that peak moment, all right, you're more than ready. It's almost easy at that point because you put so much in. Right now we're all entranced with Michael Jordan, and what's mostly known about Michael Jordan was how hard he practiced. That by the time he got to a game, that was easy compared to how hard he went in practice. That's the journey, and that's why anyone who's great embraces that journey because they're doing is they're being fully present. They're not putting off. They're focusing right here, right now, where we control.
And I'm glad you brought up Michael Jordan and the Last Dance reference to the series that was put out by ESPN, because there are now reports about how Michael was verbally abusive and he was harsh with his teammates, and that goes back to my example about Michael Johnson. They didn't understand him in the moment because they weren't in the same moment as he was, and he was bringing them to that moment with him the way he brought it to himself in his own mind. And I've had the privilege and honor of being able to work with Michael in the past, along with his trainer and friend, Tim. And I've also had the chance to work with Walter Payton. And Walter came to me when he was feeling not happy about his running up the hills, his running up the dunes and the sand. And he said, I can't do it anymore. I need motivation. And I was referenced to him to help him do that. And I said, it's not a question of being happy or motivated. It's a question of purpose. You're not reminding yourself about why you're doing this. Answer the why. And people weren't asking Michael Jordan, why are you doing this? if they would have asked that and heard his answer, they would have gone, oh, I want to win. I want to make a basket. I want to run faster, jump higher. That's what is missing, or was missing for them, and is what missing what now the commentary about Michael Jordan. And in talking to these athletes, I learned about the simplicity of the solution. That it's not about a major strategy. It's about talking to the individual and asking them, why are you doing this? So that you understand.
When the why is strong enough, you'll figure out how. That's how it comes down to it. When the why is strong enough, you'll figure out how. A compelling why is what truly gives us life. Probably one of the great books of all time is A Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
And it's
yes.
great about the Holocaust. And what it came down to is this: those that were inspired did not expire. The key to life was having a purpose that was so strong in you that you had. That's what kept them alive. Truly, if you're not inspired, you're expired. So, hey, let's inspire.
Well, and with that thought, Brian, the last few minutes we have, I want to ask you this question. And it's about the happiness that is gained from discovering gratitude and sharing gratitude. What's the relevancy and importance of that on a daily basis to assure and foundationally relevant to your happiness?
You know, there's a book that was called Power versus Force. It's a difficult book to read. It's like reading your worst textbook. But the work that was done to write the book was 25 years of looking at the frequency, right, the vibration, if you will, of emotions. And the highest frequency emotion of all is gratitude. And truly, when you're feeling gratitude, there is no room for depression, sadness, doubt, uncertainty. When you're in a state of gratitude, you are at your highest level of physical, mental, emotional, electrical vibration. Being grateful, right? The words, especially if you're not a real good speller, it's got the words in it. It has the power to focus you on being grateful. When you're grateful, you're focusing on what you can give and not what you can get. It's when you do that you make the shift to rising to your greatest potential. So to be grateful is to embrace every single thing that is in your life, especially the challenges. You know, Napoleon Hill said, within every adversity is planted the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. In other words, the toughest challenges, like we're all going through right now, when we get to the other side, those are the things from which we grow the most. Why not embrace the gratitude for the challenges we're facing every step along the way? I loved, when I was training myself, the days when I felt like I had nothing left to give, when my body was racked. I love that. My body felt terrible, my heart felt incredible. I was so grateful to be able to work that hard to where I almost would burst into tears when I felt like I'd come close to my potential. So there is no more powerful emotion to bring in your life on a daily basis. We started this show with that question. Every day we wake up in the morning, ask yourself, what am I deeply grateful about right now? And you set yourself at a higher level and move that day, and then what you focus on is what you create.
Well, Brian, it's the sharing of gratitude that seems to me, in my world, the best way for me to fulfill my happiness and move to the next level of expectation. So I'm very grateful for your presence here today with me, and I look forward to more of that in the future, as I have committed to you. But that being said, I also want to say the gratitude I have for my audience, in particular the new Laura Winter Owens. And yes, you're right, a compelling why, my dear. And you and I are going to talk. There's some new news with this Laura Winter Owen, and we're going to talk about that. But I'm grateful for her, as I am so grateful for my family and friends during these trying times, which I hope are going to relinquish a little bit for many of us in this anticipation of a great Memorial Day holiday. Brian, one last time for today, share with everybody how they should and would and could contact you to find out what's going on in Brian Byro's world.
Well, let me say how grateful I am to you, Lowell. You are absolutely the epitome of a servant leader, and servant leadership is the only real kind of leadership, trying to help others elevate to their potential. And just go to my websites. I have two of them, brianbyro.com and brianbyrovirtual.com, as we embrace the awkwardness of having to shift from live events to to virtual events.
Enjoy the day, everybody. We're about ready to close it off. Brian, I'll be in touch with you shortly with some great technology to share today's show with you. But for those of you out there listening, be prepared for next week when we're going to talk to my friend John Harris. John is with his company AppLife, which supplies education and job training for professional retiring athletes, as well as currently employed professional athletes on their pursuit of not just the education of their sport, but the education of their mind. That's John Harris. He'll be talking to us about the new technologies and the adapting and adjusting to training those professionals about their future in their sport, in their life. So, Brian, once again, thank you, sir. Have a great day today, would you?
I sure will. Seize the woo.
Woo!
Woo!